Lisa Pavelka, and today I'm going to teach you how to make two different styles of French ear wires using sterling silver wire. So let's get going. So I like to usually use a 20 gauge wire, and you don't just have to do them in sterling. You can do them in any of the wonderful wires that you can find here at Fire Mountain Gems and Beads, but these are a nice high-end piece to make. And I'm also going to teach you a really valuable skill set in how to ball wire, which will really come in handy if you want your own ball pins for suspending beads and other components on. So depending on the gauge of wire you're using, you might want a little longer length or shorter length, because you probably already know ear wires come in many different shapes and sizes. They might be more round or oblong, but let's get started with a few that are really simple to make. So the gauge of the wire refers to the diameter. So an 18 gauge would be a thicker wire, and it would make a little bit more of a chunkier ear wire, and one that may not fit through a lot of pierced ears as easily. 22 gauge wire is a bit thinner and might be a little too flimsy to be stable. So I think 20 gauge in any of the wires you choose to use are just right. Now, you can get the wire in different lengths. I usually get mine in the 5-inch or the 5-foot length, and when you unroll it, it might have a few kinks in it. So you're going to want to straighten some wire before you cut it. A couple of ways you can do that are by using nylon jaw pliers, just applying pressure and stroking, and I rotate it because we don't want to flatten it. What that's also going to do is it's going to stiffen or work harden the wire. We don't want to overwork harden it because we don't want it to be brittle when we bend it or break it. That would call for a bit of annealing. We have a video on that, but back to straightening our wire. There's also a great tool that I love, and it's this wonderful wire straightener. You just wrap the 3 little components around your wire, squeeze and pull. Now it is good to have the wire be a little stiffer so the ear wires don't bend so much after when you wear them and travel with them. So for our first wire, we're going to do a coiled ear wire, French style ear wire, and I generally like to start with 4 inches, and I take my flush cutters and get a nice straight cut along this edge. We'll move this out of the way, and our round nose pliers. So make sure that you're starting on an edge that has a nice straight flush cut. So to avoid that, you might want to check both ends, because you're going to have a pointed end. Wherever you do your flush cutting, the edge that's cut on the inside of your flush cutters is going to come to a point. So let's just go ahead and take off a tiny little bit of that to make sure that we don't accidentally have a pointed end when we do our coil wrap. So I usually bend for a coil wrap. I want maybe 2 to 3 coils. It can even be somewhere in between, 2.5. But you want it to be secure, but I don't want so many coils that it just becomes the focal element of the ear wire. So I'm going to bend it at a 1 1/4 inches. So to make a matching pair, obviously I would cut 2 lengths of wire to the same length and bend it at the same mark, the 1 1/4. So I'm going to go into my bend, and I'm working towards the tip of my round nose pliers. I don't particularly want a really big hole, and I'm just going to bend it over with my fingers and wrap it around until I can't wrap it anymore. We're going to turn our pliers a 1/4 of a turn, or 90 degrees, and with your fingers or your chain nose pliers, you can just bring that up and make a nice loop. If you're not happy with the size of the loop, you can just adjust it, pulling it tighter or pushing it back out. Now, because we have a little bit of wire, it's a little hard to wrap it around with my fingers, so I'm just going to take some chain nose or flat nose pliers, working only on the end, and don't wrap around and around and around, because you're going to be wrapping the wire around the jaws of your pliers. So you're just going to do a 1/2 turn, and I pull up as I coil. That way I'm going to have nice tight coils. And then after 1/2 turn, I let go and pick it up from the other side, just so I'm only bending the very end of my wire there, because we don't want to use more wire than we really need to. We want to save it for another project. So right now I'm at 2 full wraps here. I usually want to cut it so it's going to be on the back of my ear wire. So I'm going to bring it up another half a turn and then just a little then some. So it's going to look like 3 loops from the top of my wire, but it's going to be about 2.5 loops from the back. So when you cut your wire, when you're making a coil wrap loop on any type of jewelry connection, a lot of people will tell you to take a file and file it down because you usually have a bit of a rough edge. You want to be mindful that you're using your flush cutters and that the back side or the flat edge of the flush cutters is where you're cutting. So again, we have that nice flat edge, and just maintain control of the wire so it doesn't go flying. And then what I'd like to do, rather than file it, because you might scratch your wire, I just mount it on my round nose pliers, and with my chain nose, I just crimp it and tuck it down in against there. I just kind of do this action working all the way around the wire so it's nice and snug in there, and it crimps down the edge a little bit, and you won't have any rough edges to catch on hair or clothing. So nice smooth wire. So most of my ear wires, I use my Weber's large round bail making pliers. So you can make a larger loop, a smaller loop, whatever you like. You can even do it with your round nose pliers. But this just seems to be the perfect size for most of the ear wires I like to make. And I'm going to use the smaller of the two jaws here. So I want to look and see where my wire ended, and that being the back side. So I turn it to the front, and I'm just going to start giving it a little help. I'm going to bend it a little bit with my thumb, and that creates a bit of a neck. You can create a longer neck with your chain nose pliers and bend that so that maybe you have a couple of millimeters standing up. It just changes the look of your ear wire, and of course it's so nice to be able to make an ear wire that looks whatever way you'd like it to look. So I'm just going to wrap the smaller jaw in behind the bend, and with my fingers I'm just going to wrap it up and over and down. And that's a nice shape of the ear wire. You're going to need to do a little adjustment, very easy to do. You don't want to cut it too short because you don't want it to come out of the ear very easily. Usually I cut mine right so they're pretty much parallel with the jaw at about a 45-degree angle. You can make it longer, you can make it a little shorter. And again, I use the back end of my flush cutter so I have a nice flat edge that doesn't need to be filed down. And a lot of ear wires have this feature. I like it as well. I'm going to take my flat nose pliers and just align the tip right so it's parallel with the end and give it a little bend in the back, like so. And then if you need any adjustment to straighten it out, that's very easy to do. Now you might like a simple wire just like that, but you might want to add a little more flair. I'm going to take my bench block here, and I like to use a chasing hammer. Now I can either flatten the wire, and I'm not going to flatten the whole wire. You want to keep it nice and round at the part that's going to go into the ear, make it easy to put it in. And I'm going to use the chasing hammer here, and there'll be a bit of pounding. And I flattened it nicely. That's going to raise up that loop. You're going to need to adjust it back down. But that's a really nice aesthetic effect, I think so. Or you can even take the rounded edge of your chasing hammer if you want a little bit more visual interest and just tap some little marks in it so it's kind of got like that spoon carved look that hammered metal can have. So now it needs more adjustment again, and by doing that it also work hardens it a bit and makes the wire not so easily bendable that you're going to constantly readjust it. Because if you make an ear wire that's way too soft and it gets bent when you travel or when you wear it, you're going to be bending it a lot and you're going to eventually work harden it, and there's a risk of breakage. So having it work hardened now so it maintains its shape is really helpful in making a nice stable ear wire. So that's ear wire number one. And then the next ear wire I'd like to show you is balling wire. So you're going to want to work with sterling. You can also work with fine silver. Fine silver is a bit softer, so I do like to work with sterling when I make balled wire. Again, I can use these as like I would a head pin in some of my jewelry making design. We're going to take this wonderful fire brick. I love these. I've tried all kinds of products, but this one is very lightweight. It doesn't have heat conductivity to the bottom. It might get warm to the bottom, but you don't have to worry that if you're working on a bathroom counter or something that the heat's going to go underneath and burn it. I usually like to put like a tile or a pan over it just to be extra safe at home. Keep in mind the fire brick will retain heat on the top, and you want to keep it somewhere safe when you're done with it so that you don't come in contact with it and accidentally burn yourself. Now we're going to do some torch firing, and I'm going to put my torch just off of the fire brick so that it's over the top of it. Now with this butane torch, I use this for soldering. I use it for my metal clay work to sinter my metal clay. You can check out videos on all those things here at Fire Mountain Gems and Beads. But this is a 3-step ignition, and there's a little safety valve right here in the back. You're going to pull that down and push and ignite. Now see, it took a couple times to get that going. That's not unusual. Well, I don't want to have to hold it down with my thumb the whole time because that'll give me a cramp. Just push this pin right there and you can let go. You're going to get about 45 minutes to an hour on a full tank with butane. And then we also want to have the sharpest, hottest flame we can. So let's look at that adjustment. It's this little area right here. So you can see that's a nice soft bushy flame. That's not what we're looking for. We want to hear a sharp hiss and see a very sharp flame where we can see where the blue tip is. The end of that blue tip is the hottest part of our flame. So I'm just going to turn that away from me here. You want to have a glass or ceramic bowl standing by with water for quenching. And I've gone ahead, I'm going to keep that flame away from me while I go ahead and pick up a wire. For these, I usually cut them to about 3 inches long to make this particular ear wire. Again, you can change the adjustment to change the size and shape of your wire. So we're just going to set this off here, and I always have some protective eyewear on. It's a good idea to pull back your hair or clothing, but you should never be standing over your flame. You should always be standing well behind it. Now, you're going to see the wire ball, and you have to adjust it. You might have to angle the wire because we don't want it to roll up to one side. So right in the sharp blue tip of the flame, it'll take a few seconds and you can probably start seeing it start to ball there. And it's going to my right, so I'm going to just angle it a little. Now if I keep going, the ball is going to get bigger. We'll just turn that off right there. Always set your torch away from you so the hot tip doesn't burn you. And you can just drop it in the water, and the minute it hits the water, it's nice and cool. The reason it's important that it's a glass bowl, it's still hot up until the time it hits the bottom, and we don't want to melt plastic or burn our container. So what you have here is a beautiful ball, and I'm going to set this down here, but you can see it's black. So when you torch fire or heat metal, you'll get oxidation, and that's called fire scale. And fire scale is something we remove by pickling. I have my pickle pot here, and a pickle pot contains an acid, and usually in about 5 to 10 minutes it will remove that fire scale. Be sure to check out our video on pickling, but I'm just going to put it in there with copper tongs. That's something you'll learn about. And you don't ever want to drop your pieces into a pickle pot because you don't want that acid to splash out on you or your work area. Just gently set it in for 5 to 10 minutes, and we'll be using copper tongs to take them out. When it comes out, it goes from this oxidized black look to a dull silver. So you can see the fire scale's been removed. Now you can hand polish them. You can take a little bit of sandpaper. I probably start with an 800 grit just to smooth out the ball if there's any rough edges, and then maybe go up to 1200 and eventually 2000. Each higher grit is going to smooth it and make it easier to polish. You can polish them by using a burnisher, either your metal burnisher or your agate burnisher, but you're going to find these are kind of small and fiddly, so it's going to take some time, and it's just, you're maybe not get a nice mirror polish that you might be looking for. So another way to polish them is to put them in a tumbler with stainless steel shot for about a half an hour to 2 hours. That too will work hard in your metal and make them very nice and shiny. Check out the video on polishing to learn different ways to finish your jewelry. So for the ball earrings, what I like to do is use that same Weber's plier. This one I'm going to put a little bit more of a neck over the ball. And I don't want to use the flat nose because let's take a look at the tip here. The tip's a little wider than I'd like. So with the chain nose, I have that graduated width. I'm just going to go a few millimeters, maybe 2 or 3. I'm going to line my pliers up over the ball. And if you're not sure, if you're not good at remembering where you aligned it, you can always pre-measure and mark your wire with some permanent marker, and you can wipe that away with a little bit of alcohol on a piece of cotton. So I'm going to bend that forward at 90 degrees, and we repeat that with the other one. Okay, and then again with the small jaw of the Weber's pliers, I could certainly use the big one. I'm going to set that so that faces down, or it's on, you know what, that's not the way I want to go. Okay, there we go. Okay, let's see if we can get a better angle on the camera. So I've got the ball aligned against the large jaw. Let's see from this angle maybe. And I'm just going to roll that around, up, over, and down, just like we did with the coil wrapped ones. And you can decide to hammer it like I did, either kind of texture. And then the jaw, you're going to need to take your, the jaw of your round nose pliers and just bring that up. And then you've got your nice little loop for making an attachment in. So here's a fun thing I might do with my piece. You're going to be adding it, unless you want to add a jump ring, and that's not going to work with these crystals right here because of the facing of the hole. If I put a jump ring on it, it's not going to hang right on here. So be mindful of what you want to hang and how you want to hang it when you design your ear wires. But I'm just going to open up the back here and put the crystal on. So you want the front will be facing down, because as you roll it up and over, you don't want it to be backwards. So I'm going to open up the ball wire like so and just let it come down into place. Okay, that's the right direction we want it facing. This isn't going to close completely because with this particular component, it's a little white at the top, and that's okay. We just either want to take our pliers and close it down as far as it'll go. Not so tight that it can't swing freely, but just enough so that it can't slip off of that. And we've just made ourselves very quickly and easy a beautiful pair of glamorous crystal earrings. So I hope you're encouraged to try making your own French style ear wires. And I really want to thank you for joining me here today in the Fire Mountain Gems and Beads studio.